Okay, my name is Linda Moll. I am, as Steph said, a clinical psychologist. I have been working for over 20 years with survivors of various forms of trauma. I currently work for a state hospital in Missouri with survivors of long-term psychological, sexual, and physical abuse. And I also have served as our facility's trauma-informed care coordinator to help our staff recognize and manage their compassion fatigue and their secondary traumatization. And I started volunteering at the Endangered Wolf Center in Missouri about a year ago, and that's where I met Steph. And it seemed to be sort of meant to be, because I was very interested in working with trauma and compassion fatigue with the animal care workers, and both the work at the Endangered Wolf Center, and now I also volunteer at the Grizzly and Wolf Discovery Center in Montana, and then the working with compassion fatigue and trauma with animal care workers all have become new passions of mine. So tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about what compassion fatigue is, what some of the signs and symptoms are, and just kind of try to validate some of folks' experience with that.
Thank you so much, Linda. Is Maya on now?
I'm on. I'll need to turn off the camera. Hi, everyone. My name is Maya. I'm sorry for background noise. If you all hear it, I am currently out at New York City AAZK's Wino for Rhinos, but I'm tuning in from there. I am current president of New York City AAZK, as well as a zookeeper at the Queen Zoo. I also work at the Bronx Zoo as well. I've been in this field for about 7 years now. I am very passionate about mental health in this field, as well as very passionate about diversity in this field as well. So I'm looking forward to talking with you all, answering any questions you may have. And I'm just really grateful to be here. So I'm sorry if my video's not on, and I apologize again for the loud Manhattan noise behind me.
Maya, did you say what you want to focus on in your talk today?
Yeah, so I want to definitely focus on how sometimes the lack of diversity or even the lack of feeling seen in this field can contribute to burnout.
Thank you very much. Okay, Erika.
Hi, everyone. My name's Erika Defer. I've been in the field for almost 15 years now. I currently am the hoofstock supervisor and internship and research coordinator at Safari West in Northern California. I also serve on the AAZK board of directors as the oversight for the recognition team, which includes the grants and awards committees. I'd say the most significant part of my personal story with burnout and compassion fatigue actually comes from my rough transition into motherhood. Prior to that, I did experience a variety of trauma, including, deadly wildfires affecting my town and facility. And of course, just like I'm sure everybody here, dealing with feelings of failure and overwhelm for a huge variety of reasons. I definitely have been in some low places, including being diagnosed with postpartum depression, wanting to leave my position, but I'm really thankful I'm in a much better mental place now. And a lot of that is thankful to the support system that I have. And that does include National AAZK as a big motivation for me to continue on in the field. So really, I'm hoping to discuss, of course, the importance of recognition, the struggles of being a working parent in this field, and then, of course, just the necessity of education for everyone that is looking to enter this field in the future.
Thank you, Erika. Rick?
Hello, everybody. I am so glad to see we have 5 pages of little Zoom squares. So there's a lot of people here, a lot of names I recognize, some people I have worked with, some people I have mentored. And so it's really exciting to have this opportunity. I'm very honored to be on this panel. I am coming to you from more of my coach's seat right now. I've been a life coach for several years and mentored for many years of people transitioning from college into career into our field. I have and still do work within our field, 30 years of working for different zoos or animal training facilities, working as a zookeeper, wildlife care specialist, all the different things you can think of. And then as I've transitioned away from actual animal care, I've still worked shoulder to shoulder with a lot of our animal care staff and have hit burnout myself as well, heading into 2020. And that's actually what led to understanding this topic more and for myself. And my topics that I want to cover, what I want to add to this conversation, I'm coming from the position of understanding that this panel talk, we can't control or do anything about what might be going on in your facility and or how leadership has set culture, but we can talk about some of the tools you can use to either recognize if this is happening to you and what you can do to get out of it if you find yourself in it, and or what you can do now to prevent yourself from going further into it or in it at all if you don't feel you're there. So I want to talk about a topic that a lot of people, your head might explode a little bit on this one, self-objectification. Essentially the concept of where we picture ourselves as a certain way. And through that process, like the term objectification basically states, we give ourselves a singular, at best, two-dimensional purpose and existence. And then we can't, that's not realistic, that doesn't work. The other part of it I want to talk about is how to properly set and work with the need for boundaries, because our line of work from day one, it pushes against natural boundaries. You have to work weekends, you have to work holidays. Doesn't matter if it's your family's birthday or family vacation, animals need care every day. So immediately boundaries are pushed and we kind of let those continue to slide. So talk about how we can rework some of that a little bit. Obviously, animals need care every day. It's part of how we get compassion fatigue, excuse me. And the last thing is I want to recognize that we've been sold an improper bill of sale in our culture in America where we believe it's a work-life balance. And that just means there's two things, and it's either going to be one or the other. And the reality is there's about 7 key areas that we know of that are key priorities that we need to recognize, we need to bring into balance in our life. Work is part of that, but then it's not just life. There's many other aspects. And so I want to talk a little bit about that as far as finding that balance, because it allows us to become a more well-rounded person and get away from the singular focus that is causing the compassion fatigue.
Awesome. Thank you, Rick. Kathayoon.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kathayoon Khalil. I am calling in from Portland, Oregon. Currently, my positions that I hold include Director of Engagement for Canopy Strategic Partners, formerly known as Zoo Advisors, and Vice President of Conservation Learning at the New England Aquarium. And I'm really excited to be here to talk with you all today about this topic. I've been in the zoo and aquarium community since I was 13 years old, and have mostly worked in education, and I'm really passionate about thinking about things like the passion tax and compensation and retention and empathy, when empathy becomes too much, when it is productive, when it is not, and especially how all of these issues differentially impact people of color and other minorities or underrepresented or historically marginalized communities in the zoo and aquarium world. So I'm going to stop my introduction there because I think there'll be lots more that'll come out as we'll go. But yes, I'm just excited to see where the conversation takes us because I anticipate it'll go places that none of us could guess.
And Jim.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jim Wharton. My pronouns are he and him. I'm the Director of Conservation Engagement and Learning at the Seattle Aquarium. So I've been in the field 6 years, something along those lines, at zoos and aquariums and science centers, science labs. Worked with Kathayoon for many years on similar empathy topics. And I think the best way to think about what I'd like to talk about is the weight of expectation. So we're, as institutions, we have to balance the needs of the institution and the needs of our staff. As leaders at institutions, you need to balance and care for your staff, or in many cases, the care of animals. And so that expectation leads to a lot of that sort of compassion fatigue, in the sense that you feel like it's on you to keep going because so many people or such a weight is expected of your actions. So that's sort of where my head's at this evening, and looking forward to the conversation.
Great. Okay, so I think we have this from it's Central Standard Time where I'm at right now till about 8:30. Again, it's being recorded, so if you have to pop off, we're not offended. If you feel like you've got what you needed, go do your thing. If we get into such a great discussion, we have a lot of questions, we'll push it as long as it makes sense.
Yep, and I'll chime in about that real quick, Steph. And I just introduce myself really quick too. I'm Regina Mossotti. I'm from the Endangered Wolf Center. You guys will see me asking, checking the chat for your questions, and we really encourage you to share our stories, share questions in the chat, because if you have a question, probably everybody does. But I'm really excited to be here. Stephanie and I worked with AAZK to put this together because we've seen it firsthand, and to see all of you here just is so encouraging and inspiring to help make sure that we're getting this going. And just thank you to AAZK one more time for hosting this. We're so proud of AAZK for taking those steps and helping to create awareness about this. So make sure you put your questions in the chat.
Okay, so what we're going to do is basically who I had, the order I had of people introducing themselves on the panel is going to be the same order that we're going to go in, that each of these individuals is going to speak on the topic that they said that they were going to speak on. Now, if we have a question, it's same with you panelists. If you have a question or you have a thought you want to add, I want us to be able to interrupt each other if it's appropriate, similar to a conversation, which of course is awkward and weird sometimes on Zoom. But I definitely want to try to make this a conversation, but definitely give you a chance to speak your mind on this topic. So we'll go ahead and start with Linda. I'm so excited that you're here, Linda, and that you can bring a clinical psychologist perspective to all of this. Everybody on this panel has a ton of experience and a lot of passion about this topic. And a lot of us have been doing panels and discussing these on Zooms and at conferences. I have not been able to have a clinical psychologist on the panel with things I've been associated with. So I'm excited to bring you to the table and share your thoughts. So go ahead and start us going here.
Gosh, that didn't make me more nervous at all. A lot of these things that I'm going to talk about tonight may actually be familiar to you. And I'm hopeful that if they are, that will just validate what some of your experiences have been and sort of reinforce that what you may be experiencing is actually very real and a lot of other people experience it as well. So let's just start out and talk about what is compassion fatigue. And there are lots and lots of definitions and descriptions out there, but the one I like the best comes from Charles Figley, and he's one of the pioneers in the study of and response to compassion fatigue. And he describes it as a depletion of our internal emotional resources. And basically what happens is it occurs when you give and you give and you give, especially emotionally, until nothing is left. And you are, as the term suggests, physically, emotionally, and mentally exhausted. Most of us have probably heard that saying, you can't pour from an empty cup. And that's essentially what compassion fatigue is. It's when our giving cup is empty. Now, one thing I really want to emphasize is that compassion fatigue is a very understandable response that can happen when you are really, really good at your job, you care deeply about it, and you are exposed to and respond to the distress and the suffering of the beings that you're working with. Your feelings are valid and they're very understandable. I haven't been volunteering in the animal care world for very long, but I can tell you firsthand that I have seen how incredibly passionate the people I've worked with are about what they do and the tremendous sacrifices they make for their job and for the animals that they care for. So compassion fatigue can result if we push ourselves too far in our work, if we don't recognize when we need to take a break, or we feel like we can't take the time to take care of ourselves. We are more vulnerable to it if we've experienced past trauma and when we're under other stressors like a death in the family or changing jobs or moving or positive stressors like marriage or a new baby.
Or a pandemic.
Or pandemic, yes. Yes, very much so. And for people who work with endangered species, that stress may be further increased by the knowledge that the work that you do literally contributes to the survival of a species. So how do you know when you might be experiencing compassion fatigue? And I'm going to try to share my screen here and show this. Hopefully it'll work. Okay, this is a chart from the stress first aid module of training that comes from the Veterans Association PTSD site. And there's a broad range of symptoms and signs here, as you can tell, and that can range from very mild and temporary to severe impairment of occupational and interpersonal functioning. So some of the signs of compassion fatigue could include increased dysregulation, emotional dysregulation. That could be depression or hopelessness or anger. Overall, you just might feel like you're constantly on edge, like you could snap or you could bust out crying at any moment. Being preoccupied with what's going on at work to the point where you can't turn it off when you're off work. Withdrawing from your friends, your partners, your coworkers, or even the animals. And for some people, they might do this and they might not even be aware they're doing it sort of protectively. Like if I don't get too attached to the animals, then it won't hurt as much if something happens to them. An increasing use of a coping strategy that is unhealthy or could become unhealthy, like alcohol or food or binge watching or spending or things like that. Now I want to say a little bit about distraction. It's a very interesting thing. In many ways, it's actually very helpful. I've worked with trauma survivors for a long time, and I have heard some very, very horrific stories. And they are stories that haunt me. When I'm asleep, when I'm awake, I have dreams about it. They'll pop into my head at the weirdest times. And so since that's what I do most of my 40 hours a week, what I do when I'm off work is I read and I watch the most ridiculously optimistic, hopeful, romantic comedy novels and movies that I can possibly find. Distraction can actually be very critical to drawing that line between work and our personal lives. It kind of helps us to take a breath. It becomes problematic when it interferes with our work or other areas of functioning, or when we use it all the time to avoid feeling what we need to feel or acknowledging what we're experiencing. If you just keep pushing that away, eventually it's going to come back, I'm pretty sure. Other signs might be health problems like difficulty sleeping, physical fatigue, getting sick more often and not recovering, digestive issues, stuff like that. Decreased productivity at work. Maybe you can't concentrate. Maybe you can't work as fast as you would like or do things as well as you did. Everything just kind of seems off. And one big thing is this sort of loss of hope, optimism, and enjoyment in your job. Maybe you wake up in the morning to go to this job that you once loved and you just couldn't wait to get there. And now you dread getting out of bed and going. And some people in response to this experience these tremendous levels of guilt because they feel like they shouldn't feel that way. Or they might be feeling bad about taking time for themselves and sort of sticking their coworkers with extra work if they try to take that time for self-care. Or they might feel guilty because of something that happened at their facility and they can't get that out of their head. An increase in negative self-talk, self-blame, that can be both a sign of compassion fatigue, and it also can make it worse. So these yellow, orange, and red zones that you see here on this graphic can give us an idea of how severe our distress or our impairment might be at any given time. If we're in the yellow or the orange zone, we absolutely want to take some action, and we can do that, and that can stop it from going any further. And the good news is, and I think we're probably going to talk about this a lot tonight, is there are lots and lots of coping strategies that can help us heal and recover from compassion fatigue. Now, if we've gone into the red zone, as you can see, that's where we have maybe a clinical mental disorder like PTSD or clinical depression. That's when I would really suggest that you seek help from a mental health professional. There's an assessment that's brief. It's called the Professional Quality of Life Survey Scale, or the ProQol, PROQOL, that measures compassion, satisfaction, burnout, and then secondary trauma. It's free. All you have to do is go on to the website and tell the owners what you want to use it for, and you can take it both for yourself or for your organization. And it's kind of nice because it can give you an idea of where you might be on this continuum. And also, once you've started practicing some self-care, then you can take it again and sort of see how effective that has been.
Linda, can you repeat that website one more time for everybody?
It's called the Professional Quality of Life Survey, or the ProQol. If you just Google PROQOL, and after I get done, I can also put the website in the chat for folks to look at. So one thing that's really important to note is that compassion fatigue, what it looks like, really varies from person to person, and so does the healing process. There's no one size fits all for the recovery process. So you want to really not be afraid to try different things to see what works for you. Some people want to talk about what happened. Some people want to talk about anything but. And it's also really important to remember that we don't get there overnight. And so it's going to take time for us to recover and heal. This is a really critical time to give yourself lots of grace. I was listening to a meditation last night. I'm getting ready to retire. I've really been struggling with vicarious trauma this year. And that's recently been exacerbated by my husband being away for 3 months, and my father passed away 2 weeks ago. So I've really been doing a lot more meditation the last few weeks. And I was listening to one yesterday, and one of the things she said really hit home for me. When we are down, that is when we need more love, not less. So if all of this sounds familiar to you, I just want to reiterate, it's understandable, it's valid, you can recover from it, and now is the time to really give yourself all of the love. And there's the link I see in there. Yep. That's all I have.
Wonderful. I was starting to think that, Linda. I was like, I think she's done. Well, thank you very much. That is extremely helpful for me. I know, looking through that, I definitely can see where I am at. It is alarming for me. I definitely am currently struggling with PTSD, so I definitely have been in the red for a while, and it's something that I am working through as well, and am going to therapy for, because of all the trauma of working with wildlife out in the field, and just the horrific things that some of us see when we're working on the field, let alone some of the animals we care for on a daily basis. So being able to look at something that's visual like that stuff that we can really grab a hold of is very helpful. Thank you.
I add one thing, Steph.
Oh yeah, and then Jim, I do see you have your hand up.
Very quickly. I think it's really important for, just because you've been in the field for a long time, in fact, that can actually make you more vulnerable to it, because the cumulative effect of it. And also leaders want to be very attentive to this, because leaders often tend to take good care of their people and neglect themselves in the process.
Absolutely. And I just saw one thing pop up. Can giving yourself more love include choosing to step away from this career? And I think everybody on this panel 100% would agree with that. And I think that that's, definitely several panelists will make a comment on that. And I know that it's something I stepped away from wildlife film because I was incredibly burnt out and struggling from PTSD from the things I've seen. And it was a very hard decision to make, but I had to do it for my mental health. And I think everybody here can attest to it as well. So Jim, what do you got to say?
Yeah, both of those comments are a little close to home at the end there. But Linda, does anybody live in the green? I mean, I'm looking at that, and I don't recognize anybody with those characteristics right now?
I think probably most of us like run in there for a little while and then run out. I think there's moments where we feel so satisfied and so happy and high on our work. But I do think probably most of us are sort of in that yellow-green zone.
All right, anybody on the panel have anything to add to that or any questions before moving on to Maya? Well, Regina, do we have any questions that I have missed?
No, we don't. You got it.
Great. Maya, do you want to pop up and share your perspective from individual basis of what your experience was like and how other individuals that are non-white individual human beings are experiencing compassion fatigue and burnout?
Yeah, so again, I apologize if there's a lot of Manhattan noise behind me. I hope everyone can hear me clearly. For my personal perspective, something that I would like to bring up on a personal note is a year that hit a lot of us close to home, and that's 2020. As we all know, it was a very stressful year. It was a very trying year. For a lot of us, we didn't get the opportunity to see friends and family. And then once we started to open up again, COVID did become a very regular talk, a very normalized conversation. But I feel like another really big event happened during that same year that got a little bit overlooked in the zoological field, and that is the height of Black Lives Matter. I feel like I did see a lot of zoos did shed a bit of light on it, but it just wasn't enough. And as a African American in this field, I did feel a little bit overlooked. I was dealing with a lot emotionally and mentally, having a lot of fears, a lot of anxiety, and I think there wasn't a lot of support that was put in. I know since then there has been a few zoos that have developed resource groups, and very big process, a very big step. But a big thing I feel like for a lot of individuals is that they don't really feel seen or recognized in this field. And that's another thing too, is like whenever you look or think about people that working in wildlife, you may see a lot of the Steve Irwins, a lot of the Pratt brothers, but you don't see a lot of individuals that may symbolize a BIPOC person. And then it makes you question, you know, is this field really is for you? And what can zoos do that will make you feel like you're definitely giving back to the community? And, you know, if you're feeling, you know, like you're not seen, if you're feeling like what's going on around you is just like, it's not being brought to light, don't think that it's just you. Like I said, there are a lot of zoos that have done resource groups, but there's also a lot of organizations like AAZK that are trying to highlight the BIPOC community for anybody that may have questions that are here that want to dive a little bit deeper, that don't feel comfortable about asking questions here. I am more than happy to put my email as well as my social in the chat. We can talk on a more private level, but don't neglect your mental health. That's a really big thing. Don't feel like you don't have a voice, even if you may be the only person of color in the room. You know, your voice is just as important as anybody else's. And it's not, nothing starts and ends in the animal field. You know, I'm sure a lot of the panelists will talk a little bit later that sometimes, you know, it's hard to not take things home. And it's also hard to leave things at home and not take it to work. And there's definitely a lot of healthy outlets for that. If anybody has any questions now, that I have. Again, sorry about Manhattan noise in the background.
Thank you so much. Any questions, comments? Panelists, anything to add? Kathayoon, go ahead.
I think there's something really important here about intersectionality, right? What Maya is saying, like, we aren't just one thing, right? Like, we don't just have one identity. We're not just zookeepers or wildlife professionals or whatnot. And I'm sure we'll talk about this as we continue, but I just wanted to call that out specifically, that we have a lot of different identities that come into play at a lot of different times, and sometimes they conflict with each other. And you might be feeling something in one part of your life and have it affect things throughout the rest of your life without even knowing it. So thank you, Maya. I appreciate that that call out.
Thank you, Kathayoon. And we do have a quick question for Maya. Maya, what are some ways that we can support people of color in the field?
That's a really good question. So a lot of times, what people might have trouble with is like just kind of starting that conversation without it coming off in an offensive, undermining tone. You know, there's absolutely nothing wrong with you know, going up to a coworker and starting with the basic question that can be asked to anybody: how are you feeling? You don't have to specify, hey, I saw in the news this and this, how does that make you feel? Just go up to being like, how are you feeling? You know, like what's going on? And just and it isn't just applying to any people, it's for everybody. Like if you notice someone that you've been working with for a very, very long time might have a certain routine that they like to do, and you notice that their routine is a little bit off, you know, go up to them, approach them and notice, hey, like I noticed A, B, and C, like what's going on? How are you feeling? Definitely just having an open dialogue with that person or anybody and everybody, making sure that you are having an inclusive environment and trying to understand that everybody has a different background and not everyone came up the same way that you came up. It is definitely very hard having conversations with some of my coworkers sometimes, because I have to remember, you know, our backgrounds are a lot different, you know, for someone specifically for me that went to a low budget or income school in the Bronx, and talking to somebody that went to like more preppy school. Our backgrounds are going to be a lot different, but ultimately there are a lot of things they have in common, such as being in this field. Use that as a way to get a baseline understanding of how they feel, and then you can kind of work from there.
Thank you so much. Kathayoon, are you comfortable jumping in next?
Sure. Yeah, I can do that. So I think this point of intersectionality, and maybe that's something I'll just jump off what we were just talking about. You know, when last year's racial justice reckoning, so I identify as a first generation American. I'm half Iranian, half Pakistani. I am married now, as of a couple weeks ago, to Stephanie officiated my wedding, to a white man, and who comes from a very conservative family. And when the racial reckoning stuff was coming up, he asked that same thing and said, you know, like, what can I do to support and help? And after a while, you know, what we came to is he needed to process his own white privilege and his own background, not with me. Right. So I think that was a big moment of like this intersectionality piece of, you can be feeling this compassion fatigue at your job, but also be feeling like, man, if I walk into one more room where someone can't pronounce my name, I'm going to lose my shit at the same time. And then, you know, if one more person tells me I look young for my age or whatever, like it's tiny little mosquito bites over and over. And so knowing where your levers are and knowing how to say, like, I love and support you, and I need you to love and support me in a different way, and I need you to do your thing with someone else somewhere else. I think that is healthy boundaries, right? Healthy boundaries. Yeah, thanks, Rick. Not only with our jobs, but with the people we love, because otherwise we can't give each other the grace we deserve if we feel like we just need to accept the love that isn't working for us because it's the love that's being offered. So I'm a big proponent of that. And we'll talk through, I think, coping mechanisms a little bit later, but that's been a big coping mechanism for me, is recognizing how giving and receiving support looks for me and for other people, and what I need to ask for to get the support that I need. So again, coping strategies we'll talk about in a bit, but I'm also thinking a lot about, so Jim mentioned that he and I had done a lot of work in the empathy space, right? And so empathy is a word that gets thrown around a lot, but we define empathy basically as perspective taking, and with this underlying current of compassion, which we've talked about, the compassion fatigue, but this motivation to alleviate the suffering of others is how it gets framed a lot of times. So negative empathy, the desire to alleviate perceived suffering, that's an important one. Whereas positive empathy is the desire to extend the happiness, perceived happiness or joy of another individual. And so I think we get sucked into these spirals of negative empathy, because one of the best ways to foster empathy is through practicing caring behaviors towards others. And so when you're taking the perspective of others and you're perceiving that perspective to be negative or in harm or whatever, it can be really, really burdensome. And so that's been an interesting thing that's come up in a lot of the empathy workshops we've done, that people have said, well, okay, like, what if the problem isn't making more empathy, but the problem is tempering the empathy that I have? And so we looked into the literature on this a little bit. And one of the most impactful things that I found was it was kind of deep in the annals of Carol Saunders's writing on empathy and compassion. And she talked about how empathy without a behavioral outlet can basically foster a boomerang effect, where when you don't have an outlet to do something about the empathy that you have, you retreat back into yourself and absorb that shock, basically, that can lead to self-preservation, a lot of self-preservationist behaviors. So, I mean, those are a lot of big fancy words for saying, if I tell you that a polar bear can't find food, and then I tell you that you need to drive your car less so the polar bear can find food, you're going to say, that doesn't make any sense to me. You know what? I just can't do anything. So I'm just going to go ahead and do my normal life like I was supposed to, because that makes me happy. And then I don't have to take the bus, right? Like, we can see that the fun thing about psychology is it's all the stuff that we live on a daily basis. So it's a lot of aha moments of like, oh yeah, that is what that's called. So I think the takeaway there for me is that we need to recognize the productive outlets that we have for the empathy that we feel. And that's not to say that, like, I think that is to say that sometimes the outlet might not be obvious, but sometimes we need to retrain our brains to say that if we're not going to solve all the problems in the world, then what are we free to do with the rest of our one life, right? If we're not going to see the end of conservation and all the animals saved, and I'm going to retire to be an elementary school music teacher, then what am I free to do as a result of knowing that it's not all going to get done? So what's the impact that I want to have? The eloquence kind of fell apart at the end there, but I see some head nodding, so I think people kind of understand. I think the last point I want to make is this idea. It's almost become a trope at this point, but the destigmatization of mental health concerns, right? If I were to tell you I suffer from chronic migraines, you'd be like, cool. Yeah, that seems really shitty. But if I tell you that I've had major depressive disorder and generalized anxiety disorder for the bulk of my life, I don't know about you, but I automatically get prickly and I feel like, did I overshare? Right? Like, we feel weird talking about mental health still, even though we keep saying we want to destigmatize it. And that is cultural, that is social, and the only way to get through it is to get through it. So I think I encourage us to talk and think about that as well. Therapy works, maybe not for everyone, but it works for a lot of people. Medication works for some people. It's worked really well for me. And so
and not for others. So I think, just like there's not one pathway forward for someone who suffers from chronic migraines, there's not one pathway forward for people who live with, I'm not going to say suffer from, but live with depression and anxiety, and other mental well-being issues. And so I encourage us to continue thinking and talking about those and kind of breaking through that, like, I don't know, that system. I'm not even going to say it's a patriarchal system because I'm not sure yet, but a system that, it is a patriarchal system that discourages us from being vulnerable and forces us to exude a persona of strength, though that is not productive.
I have been working really hard on trying to actively push through the discomfort of it when I admit that I am struggling with PTSD and anxiety and depression, and I just got diagnosed with ADHD, and all of that together while trying to be successful in our field and feel like I'm contributing to something it's very uncomfortable saying it, because I know that a lot of you have been trained to go, oh wow, Stephanie has PTSD. Woo, that girl has depression. Oh my gosh, can I trust her? Should we worry about her? Is she still credible in this field? Those are the things that I start thinking, like, oh my gosh, and I avoided speaking about it for a really, really long time. And I feel like I became, what is that, toxic positivity, where I was trying so hard to give hope to everybody because I could see they wanted that hope from me and they wanted the enthusiasm and the happiness. And I oh my God, I got so burnt out from trying to do that. And now I'm in front of all of you guys being like, bah, I can't do that anymore. We need to talk about this. And if I have to put myself in front of people and admit that that's where I'm at, I'm in the red right now. And I wish I was on the other side and I could say to you guys, I got it through and here's how to do it. 1, 2, 3, but that's not where I'm at. And that's why this is so important to me. And these individuals that are on this panel are people that I go to regularly because they are a wonderful support system. And I know that they have been through some of this too. So it's just wonderful to get to a space where you surround yourself with people that are starting to open up and admit these things comfortably with each other. So I'm thankful to everybody on this panel for being there for me. And I'm so grateful that everybody here is wanting to learn more how to feel comfortable in that space as well. Jim?
Sometimes I'm reluctant to talk about empathy because I get branded the empathy guy, right? But since Kathayoon already brought it up, empathy is both a solution and a risk factor for compassion fatigue, right? And that one of the ways that you feel like you can help or get through it is that you want people to feel like they understand your perspective, and you want to be able to reach out there and help, and by trying to understand perspectives, you're listening. But there's different kinds of empathy, and that's wherein lies the rub. All empathy is not the same. So if you're thinking about like affective empathy being, I'm going to feel what someone else feels, that could be dangerous, and it can lead to what Kathayoon is talking about, that moral disambiguation where it's too much. I can't do this. That I'd say you actually can feel wounded yourself. And then there's cognitive empathy, which means I understand what you feel. And sometimes that's, in conservation, cognitive empathy is what we need, not affective empathy. But, in some of these instances too, I think people need to understand that you understand what's happening. You don't have to feel the same. We don't have to be the same, but understanding, expressing that you have that understanding, is one of those steps you can take forward. And then you're going to make mistakes along the way, because what people also don't need to hear is your little slice of life is exactly the same as their trauma. Like, I know exactly what you mean because this other much less severe thing also happened to me. But still, it's that listening and being there and trying to understand. Don't necessarily feel the pressure that you have to be the same and feel the same.
Thanks, Jim. Regina, I can see that you're going to have a question here for a moment, but I want to have Linda respond, and then Regina, you can pop on next.
I'd be willing to bet, in fact, Stephanie, that the fact that you did acknowledge that, and everybody who does, has an impact on everybody else in the field, because it kind of gives them permission to do that too, and to seek help for it. So I think that by doing that, you're actually opening a lot of doors and helping a lot of people.
I hope so, because it's uncomfortable as hell.
Well, you actually got some comments already saying thank you for that. I mean, that's an inspiration to see other people do that. And that's actually one of the questions that we had. And I think what Stephanie's doing is a great example. And Jim and some others made comments too about how they've dealt with burnout, and Linda. But one of the questions was, how can we destigmatize mental health? What are some ways of doing that? And I'm going to start on that. For me, one of the ways that I did it was, we have a daily or weekly animal care team meeting, and I was very open with my staff and saying that I was essentially seeing a therapist, and that I went through a really rough time and I wasn't myself, and shared that with them, that I was going through a really stressful moment, and I apologized for not being myself, and it created a really good situation. And that's me as a leader. So I know it's different in different perspectives, doing that, but I wanted to be able to open up that it's out there, it's okay, and we all go through it no matter what. And I saw some of my staff starting to open up and admit that they were seeing a therapist, and then that inspired others to do it. And it was this effect for everybody, and very inspiring. So, but anybody else have questions about ways to help destigmatize?
I think one thing I noticed in the chat is someone saying that they felt nervous or scared to bring that part of themselves forward because they were afraid that it would be afraid of retribution or whatever. They were afraid someone would take it out on them. And I would say, if you are a man, like in any sort of managerial or supervisory position, like that's a great way that you can help destigmatize mental health, is by creating an environment where people can come to you with their full selves, and they will not be, chastised for it, or they will not be, punished for it in the long run or something like that. I think we can create those systems. And if you have a supervisor that, you feel like would be open and amenable to those conversations. Can't tell you how many times I cried in Jim's office when he was my boss, but it was a lot. Use that relationship to kind of understand more about, they're not allowed to discriminate for mental health issues, but like, unfortunately, people do things they're not allowed to do from time to time and couch it as other things. I haven't experienced that, but I'm sure it exists. But I would say, like, use those good relationships to practice what it feels like being vulnerable, and get down the language that you want to use, right? Try to understand how you want to be able to talk about your own needs and your own self. And, that kind of stuff doesn't just come out of your mouth the first time seamlessly. You need to think about what makes you feel comfortable, what you like to share, and how you like to be supported again. So if you have a good relationship with your supervisor, I would say start there and start practicing.
Erika, and then Jim.
I just wanted to kind of play off of what you were just saying with having that strong relationship with your management team, because it really is incredibly important. So if there are other supervisors or managers listening, as a supervisor, I strive to create strong relationships with my team, and I do feel that it has paid off in a lot of different aspects. Because if I do have somebody that comes to me and is willing to trust me enough to express that they are having struggles with their mental health, and I can do something to support them, that's just going to end up helping your whole team, helping your facility, helping the animals that you care for. So it really is just so important to have that trust and that relationship with your team, because there is zero downside to it. It's only going to improve the care of your staff and your animals.
Jim?
Yeah, as a person who shows relatively little affect, as a person who's, in a leadership position, expected to be the we got this guy, and as a person with a lot of positional authority, a lot of privilege, it is not an expectation that I should show any emotion at all. And I think one of the ways that the supervisor can create a space where people feel comfortable is by demonstrating some vulnerability, talking about when you're struggling. And that's the last thing that I want to do, but I feel like it's it makes, I have found that over the last couple of years, it's really like just made my job easier to be able to help to let my staff know that I'm struggling. And I think that I hope that it's created an environment where others can also do the same thing. But it's, you know, it's sometimes, it is a patriarchal system. And so if Kathayoon and Stephanie, you know, talk about their emotional state at work, it's different than if Rick or I do it, because of, and so it's important for Rick and I to be talking about these things openly so that people understand that it's okay. And I'll tell you, even though it's personally uncomfortable, I also feel risk, even though I have relatively little risk as a you know, senior manager at an institution. I still worry about how my boss, the COO, is going to think about it, how my peers who are relying on me are going to think about it if I tell somebody that I'm just not focused today, that I just, you know, that I don't have the energy to do one more meeting today. So it's I think demonstrating, you know, taking that step to demonstrate it as a manager and a leader, one of the ways you could try to create that kind of environment.
So I'm going to have Rick add his 2 cents on this, and then Jim, if you want to take over after that and share your points.
It might be 3 cents. I like to talk. No, I want to add on to what Erika was saying too. I know a lot of folks that are in our audience, they may have a supervisor or manager they don't have that relationship with, that or maybe someone who has their own struggles, and therefore they're not that good at necessarily the people skills part of managing so much as schedules and budgets. So how do you approach that person? So some of the strategies I want to try and share here are just for you to take from it what might work for you and think about it. I'm not saying this is the exact equation that'll get you the golden ticket, but so an example, whether you've been diagnosed recently with something, or you know you've had it, you've been keeping it quiet for a while, whatever, or you're just done and you're having panic attacks and it's not clinical and it hasn't been diagnosed. When you want to tell your boss or supervisor, sometimes because we have that realization, we're just like, bleh, and we want to verbal vomit, and I get it. But if you can, take a moment to think about why you want to share it. Not that you have to question your desire to share it, but it allows you to verbalize why you're coming to your manager with this. So think about that part to give yourself the opportunity to then verbalize it to that manager. So it's the why, and then also visualize and think about, how am I going to share this? Because sometimes we get so worked up and we're already dealing with so much. We just like, oh, they're walking away from the team, I can go jump on them right now. But in their mind, they're heading off to talk to the vet about something coming, and it's not a good space. So think about the how and how you're going to do that. These are all steps to give you an opportunity to clearly communicate and have the opportunity to do that. The other part of it, when you take that first step, open with, I'm sharing this with you because I'm really excited to build trust with you. I'm doing this because I want to build a better rapport. I want to have this avenue of communication, because you're setting the tone as to the purpose to the person receiving that information. And they'll be like, oh, that's okay. So we're building trust here. You're basically telling them, this is what we're doing. Because if you don't already have that connection, this is how you're going to start building it. And it almost makes it seem like, wow, I'm approachable enough. You're going to trust me with this information. Okay, let's talk. So just some of those dynamics in working with the human animal can really shift that conversation, especially when you have it for the first time. And maybe you'll feel a little less exposed, perhaps, or even if you still feel exposed, it's an opportunity to maybe give yourself some more tools and some more strength leading into that conversation. And if you have a peer or a buddy you can talk to first to go, hey, this is what I'm thinking, how I'm thinking of doing it, and just practice that process, that can also be powerful too. Because again, if you're not at a point where you already have that trust with management or supervisor, these are some steps you can maybe take to help build that initially on your side.
That is excellent. I'm coming to you to build trust. All right, Jim.
You know, I may cede some of my time back because I've talked a lot already. And, you know, I think the one thing that I did want to talk about was just the sort of weight of expectation. Like when you think about as an animal care professional, a lot of our animal care professionals were here throughout the entire pandemic. They didn't have the luxury of working from home like a lot of professionals at our institutions did. So they were here every day and were forced to sort of compartmentalize their own health and well-being, not just mental health and well-being, but their physical health and well-being, exposed to each other and to people in transit and everything else. And I know that there was a heavy weight of that, and we did it because the animals depended on us. And a lot of leadership folks were in a similar situation, not identical, but similar in that there's an expectation that you're trying to do the best you can to balance the needs of the institution with the needs of your staff. And there's no perfect path forward because we are all living in a completely unique situation in our lifetimes, at least in this country, I should say. And so trying to understand that you want to be able to represent the needs of an institution so that it's there on the other side, but also make sure that your staff are taken care of. It's a tricky balance for a leader, I think. And there's sort of we've been coming out of the pandemic for a couple of years, and so we're even still not completely out, but now maybe a little bit different than we were 6, 8, 10 months ago. And there's sort of this like shadow effect where all of that stuff that you sort of, while you were being the I got this guy, it just sort of kind of comes and gets you later. You may think you're doing just fine, and then it catches up to you. And then maybe it's that whole 25 years that catches up to you at the same time. So I know right now when I'm thinking about, because I'm as an elder statesman on this panel, I'm thinking about retirement, but at the same time wondering how am I supposed to retire? Because the work that we do, it's not going to be over when any of us are done. It feels like the world's on fire. So how do you retire? And it's related to something that someone else, had brought up earlier. Can I step away from the field if it's what I need to do? And, I've thought that there have been times throughout the last 5 to 10 years, I'm like, is this really still bringing me joy? Is it still the thing that's going to be the best thing for me? And I thought, like, I can't quit on this. Like, what would all of my peers think who are still there if I walked away from this? So I think there's a lot of these things that we carry, this weight of expectation, this weight of, the world being on fire. And, zoos and aquariums create a sense of camaraderie and family that I think is both great and challenging. We sometimes think of our institutions as families. We're one big family here. That's not always a great thing. It doesn't necessarily give you the separation you might need from your work and from your life. And so I think that prioritizing what you need to do is not a betrayal of your peers. It's not a betrayal of your institution or your field or the earth or however big you want to think of it. And so I think, that if anything, leaning on each other for helping recognize that you have that a compromised you is not doing the things that you think that you're not allowed to step away from. And I think that's where I'll stop, Steph.
Thank you. You did touch a little bit on organizational survival, right? I was just reading some comments. I've really battled on saying this out loud, but I have noticed on a couple private groups where there are people that are really, really frustrated with some organizations in our field because of their response during the pandemic. So I was looking forward to you touching on that a little bit, because leaders are people too. Managers, directors, board members, they're people too. They have seen a lot, they've heard a lot. They're working with donors, they're trying to find money to feed the animals, to keep the habitats up to date, to meet standards, to pay staff. It's a lot of pressure, and it's a lot of responsibility. And a lot of leaders in our field don't always express that because, just like we've said, just like any of us, they don't want to appear weak or not reliable or any of that. So they try to stay strong and don't always show those struggles that are going on behind the scenes to keep the zoo going. And they do sometimes have to make extremely difficult decisions that is for the betterment of the mission and the zoo. And I just think it's important that we keep that in mind. Just keep it in mind. I'm not saying anything's right or wrong. I'm just saying that that's something that we need to acknowledge. Just being someone who works with keepers and works with directors and board members a lot, it's sometimes we forget that we're all in this together. We all want to be here for a reason. But sometimes really difficult choices need to be made, and they're very painful.
And just before Kathayoon jumps in, I do want to. I think there are plenty of circumstances where staff are legitimate, and you should absolutely 100% be upset with the organization. I mean, I do agree with you. Many times you may have information that you can't share. There's additional details that staff don't understand, and that is not an excuse for making bad decisions that hurt people in an organization. But you'll also have you have to live with the fact that there's no perfect way forward. And so when you think of an institution has a rainy day fund, I've had staff come in my office to say, you should run that down to zero to make sure that your staff are, employed for as long as you possibly can. And that's not what we did as an institution. I think I feel personally comfortable with the decisions we made, and I think that we did the best that we could. And there's still going to be plenty of people who felt like we should have done something more for our staff individually. And it's just something you have to live with. So I appreciate what you're saying, Steph, that there are sometimes things that people don't know, and many people are doing the best they can. And then sometimes institutions have done wrong by people. And I think it's okay to admit that.
Yeah, absolutely. Rick.
All right, hold on to your hats, kids. I'm going to go through this as quickly as possible because I know we're running low on time. We're already past our first hour, and I don't want to keep people any longer if they have other stuff to do. First and foremost, like I said when I did my intro, there's 3 key areas I really want to dive into with you guys. And this one, when I first studied it and read about it, it really kind of blew my mind. We're familiar with the term objectification when it comes to usually, like how somebody looks. Movie stars talk about objectification, and we're like, oh yeah, you made $1 billion in the movie, too bad. But it's more about just being put into this sort of category or single or at best 2-dimensional version of an individual. And that's what everyone expects from them. And the idea of self-objectification really blew my mind, but it also really hit home because I did that to myself throughout my career. And the idea being is that we define ourselves by our career. It is the title or the work we do. And unfortunately, what this does is it creates, and honestly, usually by accident, this slow over time addiction to our work, because if we're identified by the work we do, then we are also going to want to make sure we're doing it really, really well. And that other people know we're doing it well, and that if we get critiqued or something happens, we take it very personally because it's attached to our identity. And so the more that we start to really dive into our work and become, so attached to it, that addiction starts to occur then where things get a little slippery. We don't want to do anything that might risk losing that identity because it's so ingrained as to who we are. With this self-identity is also kind of intertwined then with the fact that we as caretakers of animals, we're at a different level of emotional attachment to the work we do. And I said for years, decades even, I love my job. I love my job. My job is not what I really loved. I loved the animals that I worked with. I loved the interactions I had with guests. I loved aspects of things that occurred while at the job, and I just equated that to I love my job. And that also then becomes dangerous because so much of our emotions are attached to the work we do. And it's natural because we are, of course, attached to the animals we care for. And those of you that are leaders in here that are attending this because this is important to you, you're emotionally attached to your people. And that's a good leadership, but it becomes so terribly intertwined. It becomes a part of every aspect of our life. We take pride in our work, as we should, but that pride and that built-in passion for our work, coupled with the emotional connection and self-identity factors, also means that when we feel we are not seen for what we're doing, or the work we're doing isn't appreciated, we tend to want to double down on it and go even further into it. And undoubtedly, this leads to the burnout. This leads to the compassion fatigue. And unfortunately, this starts to become habitual behavior for us. And just many of you obviously study behavior. Habits become loops that are just naturally occurring. We don't even sometimes think about it. It's something that's just kind of been put on autoplay on how we act and behave. So, once we find ourselves in that hole, which, I should imagine if, I don't know, I don't want to call anybody out, but if anybody in the 5 pages of people here would like to just show, instead of a show of hands, put in the chat, just the number 1, if you feel you've hit that burnout or compassion fatigue at some point in your career, just to show the camaraderie of people that are here doing it. And the fact that we've been, look at it there, it's just blowing up. Obviously, you're attending not just because you want to learn more about this, you're part of this, you've experienced it. And I appreciate everyone who has offered up that number 1 to show that. It's just, that's amazing to me, because we, of no fault of our own, have found ourselves in a lifestyle that has created a situation where we have let go of our boundaries. And I said sort of in the intro as well, the first day on the job, it's like, hey, your weekends are now Tuesday and Wednesday, or if you're lucky, 2 days off together, it might be like Tuesday and Thursday. And you're okay with that. And you're okay with working weekends and holidays. And it's great when you're out of college, you don't really care. You're just getting your career started. But then you start to realize 5-10 years later that, well, I'd like to have a family. I'd like to see my kids on Christmas morning, or any version of that. And unfortunately, as we start with the natural process of just the fact that we have to care for animals, doesn't matter what day it is, other boundaries start to get crossed as well. And we start to let those boundaries get crossed a little bit here, a little bit there. But then over 5-10 years, those little bits of boundary crossing have started to erode any sense of boundaries at all. And because of the emotional attachment, we bring our work home with us constantly. We dream about it. We have nightmares about it. We either absolutely wake up on fire to get back to taking care of those animals that we see how they're doing, or we are completely dreading it because it's so ingrained a part of our life. What I want to make sure that talking about boundaries that we understand is that because it's been a slow process of time, you've let these boundaries get pushed and to the point where maybe you didn't even realize you were, because the way you were like excited to do these things anyway. So it's okay. It takes time. What Linda had said, you didn't get there overnight, and you're not going to get out of it overnight. It takes time and being purposeful in what you're doing and working on that, working on stopping that bleed of work into the rest of your life. I think in time we start to realize that these boundaries have been crossed because, I'm as guilty as anyone. I've said it multiple times as a warning, but the way I say it, of course, because of my position in the past, it's been more of a, it's a warning with a smile. Zookeeping isn't a job; it's a way of life, and I don't think that's okay. But that's the nature of the work. But does it have to be? And who are we then to decide, or they are to decide, or our bosses, or whatever? It's been a culture of our work for a very long time. When it comes to company culture, it has to start with the leadership. But when it comes to our own personal way of dealing and working in our lives, well, that's up to us. And so that's the last part of what I want to touch on here. And that's talking about how we need to start reprioritizing certain key areas of our life. One of the number one things when you look up compassion fatigue and burnout, one of the number one things multiple doctors across the board will agree on is finding balance between your profession and personal life. And I always argue when it comes to work-life balance, it is work and it's health, it's finance, it's family, it's your faith if you have any spirituality, your friends, and even fun. These key areas of your life, work is a part of 7 key areas of your life. And what we've done, and I'm as guilty as anybody, all the other areas start to become less prioritized. I didn't have time for that. I didn't have time for that. I didn't have to, if you replace I didn't have time for that for it's not a priority, it kind of reestablishes how you're living your life. And I want to say again, this has been a long road for you to get here. You are not going to come away from this panel going, okay, these are the things I need to do, and tomorrow it's going to be better. There are things you can do that starts making the process better. These are small action steps you take. You be very clear and concise with what you want to do with your prioritizing of these areas of your life. One of the things you need to acknowledge is the fact that you are human. You are like your animals you care for. You have habits you have created. These habits sometimes start by accident in the sense of the way you self-talk, the way you conduct yourself at work, the way you bring work home with you. And I'm not saying don't care about your work. I'm not saying don't be emotionally attached to your work. My goodness, you're passionate about what you do, whether it's conservation or animal care or education, all the above, any of the other components I didn't mention. But it's a matter of recognizing that work needs to only go so far into the rest of your life. And there's other parts that make you human. There are other parts that allow you to have a human experience. And well, yeah, Rick, but I need to do this with my animals. I have to do this. I have to do that. I get it. I get it. But if you're sitting here today listening to this panel because you've reached the bottom or you feel you're dang close to it, then honestly, you need to start looking at how can you draw some significant boundaries, how you can start to prioritize self-care, prioritize your nutrition and your health. Does that mean get a personal trainer and go to the gym? No, but it might mean setting aside 10 minutes each day to go for a walk away from everything else to just listen to some music or whatever that might look like for you. Was there a time you used to love just sitting down and reading a book, but now you can't? Okay, well, find a way to do that. Find new habits to create. And when it comes to looking at, really analytically looking at how you got to where you are, yes, there are a lot of outside factors. Absolutely. Absolutely. The pandemic's a great example. You were all considered essential workers and had to put your life at risk as far as we knew because of the pandemic versus other people that had office jobs that our same facilities got to sit at home. There are a lot of outside factors, but the only thing you can control is how you respond to those outside factors. And the only thing you can control is how you feel and think about it. And it is really hard. It's hard work. I know. I've coached plenty of clients. I know it's hard work. But that's why, just what Linda said earlier, therapy can be key. Therapy can be so important. A coach can be important. A good coach, if you need therapy, will say, you know what, I would love to help you, but you need to go through therapy first, because there are only certain dynamics a coach can do in getting you structured and going through things versus therapy. Whatever that version may look like for you, I highly recommend reaching out for help. Reaching out for help is a sign of strength. And I know in our culture, we've been told that, you got to stand alone, the alpha wolf and all this other, stuff about whatever the junk is. I'm sick of it. When we help each other, it fulfills a natural social bond that we have as humans. When we ask for help, we help ourselves and we help that person we ask for help from, because it strengthens that bond and that connection in our social and human dynamic. So think of it this way. I'm going to end on this. When I talk about prioritizing other parts of your life and recognizing that you need some boundaries around how work infiltrates those areas. Most of you are animal care people, or at least were at one time. It's enrichment for you. Why do we offer enrichment? Why do we offer experiences for our animals? Why do we offer different things for animals to do each day? Because there's different components that make them whole as an animal. They have different adaptations that we like them to express and we want them to engage with. You have different adaptations and things that you are also makes you the whole thing that you are. So I want you to understand that when it's like, no, I need to take care of my animal. I need to do this. I'm so dedicated to my work and it's so hard to pull away. Recognize you need to treat yourself as well as you treat your animals that you care for, because otherwise you're not going to be able to show up for them. Otherwise, you're going to leave something unlocked. Otherwise, you're going to forget to feed them out at the end of the day. Otherwise, who knows what's going to happen. So if you need to look at reprioritizing things in your life as enrichment, then use the language you need to use to get it to your head and to your heart, because this is really important. This field, what we do for work, whether it's conservation or education or just taking care of animals that are under human care, it's too important to not do it well. And if you aren't doing well, you're not going to do it well. And it's not your fault. We blame ourselves so hard sometimes for our downfalls. And why can't I be like that person? Why can't I do, let it go. Give yourself some grace. Give yourself some grace. Ask for help, however that may look like. Honestly, my coaching, I coach a wide variety of people, and I am more than happy. Anybody on this panel, you want to go to my website, and there's a little place where you can schedule a free 30 minutes. If you want, schedule that and just say, AAZK in there. We'll do, it's 30 minutes for free no matter what, but we'll also talk about maybe other things we can do at a discounted rate, because I really feel that this is too important not to be able to help. And I know that our zoo community doesn't get paid that much. So we'll figure something out to maybe work together and talk about some things that might help you out.
Thank you so much.
One last thing too, Stephanie mentioned toxic positivity. I did a podcast episode on toxic positivity versus positive thinking, because I think too often, I know very often I see in our Facebook forums in the different zoo world, people really screaming out loud how annoyed they are with toxic positivity. And I get it, but that doesn't mean we do not coerce our mind and our brain into the concept of positive thinking, because there's power behind that. And you talk about all sorts of brain hacks. I mean, I could go for hours on this stuff, on how it's been proven the way you think can perpetuate the rest of your existence. I'm not saying the secret way you just think you don't have cancer and suddenly it goes away, but I'm talking about how we perceive the world. So if you want, I can send that link out too for that particular episode if anyone's interested in that.
So it is 8:21. This doesn't have a hard stop at an hour like some accounts do. However, it has been scheduled until 8:30. We're not 100% sure if it's going to cut us off or if we are going to be allowed to extend it. Still learning. So just to let you know, if that does happen, we apologize. And again, that this is recorded. Linda.
I've been sitting here doing this while Rick has been talking, because it's so much exactly what I would want to emphasize as well, that you don't have to change your life completely to do self-care. Just start with 5 minutes a day, but it's got to be every single day, and it could be something stupid, like just go out and skip for 5 minutes, or just look at something, or be in nature, or draw a picture. It doesn't have to be something massive. And one thing I've talked to people about is kind of have a buddy to do that with, or to check on and say, have you done your 5 minutes today? And that way it doesn't feel like a huge chunk out of your time. And it can make such a difference to just fill your cup up that little bit. And then I also liked what you said, Rick, about it being like enrichment, because ultimately taking care of yourself is going to make you better at your job. So if that is what you really want to tell yourself, that when you start to feel guilty about taking time for yourself, in the end, it's going to be the benefit. You're going to benefit, your coworkers are going to benefit, and the animals are going to benefit. So it's okay.
Erika?
So of course, to touch on a lot of what has been said, but something that of course resonates with me is setting boundaries. And that was something I never used to do. And I didn't realize how much it impacted me. And I am sure every single person in this room has either been in that position or is currently in that position of not knowing what boundaries that they need to set. And I was unfortunately thrown into needing to set boundaries when I had my son, because I had a lot of trauma that went along with that. And that was a lot of physical challenges for me that I couldn't actually get back to where I was previously. So not only from those physical challenges, the mental challenges that I went through, but then wanting to have a better balance in my life, I kind of had to set those boundaries. And after doing that, it's been a game changer for me. I'm not saying things are perfect. I definitely still have a lot of struggles, and there's a lot of stuff that I'm working on for myself to improve for personal reasons, as well as to benefit my team, because I constantly make mistakes. But figuring out what boundaries are necessary for you to have a live the life that you desire to live is going to make such a huge difference. So, and I know we're running out of time, and I know I didn't get to speak a whole lot about this, but if anybody has questions or wants to chat more about the aspect of being a working parent and how to navigate that, I'm happy to share my contact information as well, because I'm working on being more vulnerable with some of the stuff that I went through, and I found that with the people I've shared it with, it's made an impact for me and for them. So I would love to be able to talk about that a little bit more if anybody's interested.
Thank you, Erika. Kathayoon.
Yeah, this is a comment that kind of goes back a few minutes, but that's okay. So I did lose my job in the pandemic. I lost my dream job, and I never saw it coming. And it was easily and still is one of the worst things that's ever happened in my life. And cried about it yesterday. It just is, the trauma is still so very, very, very real. And one thing that resonated with me, I can't remember if someone said it or if it just popped into my head, but I was let go from a zoo that I dedicated my entire life to, that I had, brought my name to that institution and used, talked so highly about it for so many years. And someone told me, and I said, like, I love this institution so much. I gave everything to this zoo. And someone said, a zoo can't love you back. And that was a really profound, very simple thing to hear, that an institution can't love you back. Right. And the people at the institution change, and the people can like you and be on your team or whatever. But it was at the same time really jarring and also really cathartic to hear, because I felt betrayed by something that doesn't have feelings. Right. It helped me to find the target of my anguish and really put put my emotions where they belonged, not feeling like this place that had built me had let me down, because the place had nothing to do with it. It couldn't make those decisions. And so I think that is, like, it is still my zoo. It is still a place that I love. I can still hold all those good memories, but that helped set me straight that this did not invalidate all the good things that had happened before at that institution. It put it in a different light. And so I wanted to share that with folks who are feeling like they, are having a hard time with their institution, or feeling challenged by feelings of loyalty and betrayal and things like that. Yeah. Okay, I'll stop there.
Yeah, identity, letting what you do for a living become your identity. That is where I have to work at my dream zoo. I need to get to this position. I need to have this type of credibility. Learning how to let that go is very tough. And
I like having it be part of my identity. Like, I like having my identity be being a wildlife conservationist, like I like having, but it's not the only part of my identity. Like, there are many other things that I am in addition to that. And it's very, like, I am not having, thanks, Rick. Like, I have a chosen family of friends. Like, I have a furry family. Like, I love my job and my work and my identity as a conservationist. And there are a lot of other things that I identify as. But yeah, I don't think it's one or the other. I don't think we're anyone saying, like, don't make your job your identity, right? Because I think we do this because we love it. Mm-hmm. And it's okay to love something. Just know where the boundaries of that love are.
Rick.
Just real quick, if nothing else, I want everyone to remember where you are is just where you are. It's not who you are. I'm going to say that again. Where you are is just where you are right now. It's not who you are. So if you're feeling you can't function or do your work right and you hit this extreme low, it's just where you are right now. It's not who you are. And that's important for you to hear, because sometimes we have a very hard time when we're in a low, not identifying as the low. I am depressed. No, you are you, and you are dealing with depression. It's different. It's a very different structure of the sentence, and those words are powerful. So just remember that.
Erika?
So I'm going to do a quick little shameless AAZK plug real quick. So as you guys know, I'm the oversight for our grants and awards committees. And as I said in my introduction, AAZK really has been powerful for me to keep me motivated to be in this field. So if you are somebody that's looking for an outlet, it is related to your job, of course, but it still is an outlet, at least it is for me, as well as the ability to feel like you're part of something a little bit bigger. I strongly encourage you to look into either becoming an AAZK member, but also look into joining the committees and programs that we have, because we do have openings and it's a great group of people. Part of my support system, I do truly believe, comes from AAZK as well as from my close friends and family. So finding the support system that works for you to help you move forward, however that looks, whether that's staying in the field, leaving the field, changing what that means to you, is really going to be beneficial to yourself. The other thing I just wanted to add was a different way of looking at work-life balance. We just recently with my facility did one of the Gray's webinars, and it was really useful. And one of the terms that they used was work-life harmony rather than work-life balance. And I really like that. It really resonated with me because it gives you that okay to sometimes have part of your life be more heavily focused on work, and sometimes it's more heavily focused on a different aspect. And that's just the reality, is there's going to be fluctuations, but still knowing where those boundaries are and being able to understand how to find that work-life harmony is, again, just going to help you live a happier, more peaceful life with the understanding that those fluctuations exist.
Go ahead, Linda.
I know I've talked a lot for somebody who's not in the animal care field, so I'm sorry about that. But I think one other thing I want to say is that the literature on the compassion fatigue and like vicarious trauma, sorry, my cat's biting my headphones, is that it's that phrase that I've come to hate, which is that which does not kill us makes us stronger. But it's literally true. It's true in this case, in that it's hard work, like Rick said, to get through this kind of a thing. But when you do, it does increase your resilience, and you will have so many more tools in your toolbox to then deal with the next time that it comes around. And I think you'll find that you get better and better at it as long as you address it and don't neglect yourself.
So we did not have a hard cutoff so that we can kind of gently wind out of this. Of course, you're welcome if you have to go, you can pop off. But I would like to do a gentle wind down by potentially, is everybody on the panel? Can you stay a couple more minutes? Cool. Why don't we have our closing remarks from each individual, just kind of processing what we all heard, and any other final thoughts that you want to add, or if you forgot while you were, you were on stage, and you want to share something new. And also, if you feel comfortable, maybe share with people where you're at and something that you're working on and how you're getting through it. Optional.
Yeah, and I'll start that off. Guys, so thank you to everybody. Thank you so much for all of this. Both the panelists, all of you did an amazing job, and I learned a ton tonight. I told Rick, he made me cry already with some of the stuff that he said, and same with all of you. It was very powerful and very helpful. We had comments in the chats, people saying this was better than a therapy session. So that means you guys made a big difference, and thank you to all of you for that. And then I want to have a huge shout out to everybody that attended, whether you made a comment or not, whether you asked questions or not. Just being here is the first step. It's a huge step. Acknowledging it, learning about it, sharing the information that you guys gained today with your coworkers, with your supervisors. This will be shared afterwards. If you know anybody that's dealing with anything, share this with them as a way for them to learn more. And then I don't know if you all saw, but Linda's going to share information on the Facebook page for this. Some really great resources that are very helpful in a variety of ways. And I share that actually with all of our panelists and anybody that's here. If you guys have any resources that you guys have had that have worked, share it on that Facebook page, invite your friends to it. It's a great place to share that information. So please do that. And the last thing I'm going to ask for you guys all to do is in the message section while we're doing a quick closeout from our panelists. And I know we didn't get to everybody's question. So panelists, when you're not going, if you guys have any suggestions for our guests, I'm going to share a few quick questions. Feel free to add it in the chat. But one of the biggest questions that we had is, as a supervisor, how do you accommodate your team members with mental health issues, but making sure that you're fair to the rest of the team in terms of allowing that time off that's desperately needed, but making sure the rest of your team doesn't get burnt out or overworked. And there's some really good advice already shared about prioritizing your animal care needs and going back to basics. But if you guys have any other suggestions, please share. And then we had a staff member who one of the guests asked that as a staff member, she told her supervisor that there were, or he, I'm sorry if I don't remember who asked, but that there were mental health issues, and the staff supervisor responded with, well, we're all going through issues, or kind of downplayed it. If you have any suggestions on how to handle that, please throw them in the chat. And then the last thing I'm going to add for you guys, if there's anybody that has great things that have worked for them on how to deal with mental health, feel free to share it here in the chat. Everybody would benefit from it because everybody, as you've heard multiple times, deals with it in different ways. And it helps to learn different ways to manage it for different personnel. So thank you all.
I know that this is recorded. I want to say when I watched Grace's panel that they were able to somehow collect all of the comment section. But if for whatever reason that doesn't work out the way that we want, can we add some of these comments to the Facebook invite comment section? And then maybe we can grab some of those and it can go out in an AAZK newsletter or something. I'm sure there's other strategies that people have done to share information that might be better, but that's the best I can think of right now. All right, Erika, do you want to have any final thoughts? And then if you have a response to any of those questions, any of the panelists. Go ahead, Erika, or anybody, if you want to volunteer. Sorry, Erika.
Yeah, no, sure. I think I kind of missed what you were asking before, just something that we're personally trying to work on. Is that what you were asking?
Any final thoughts, anything that you maybe missed that you want to share? If you're, struggling with something, what are you working on? Just if anything stands out that you want to share again, and then if you have any answers to any of the questions that Regina just asked.
Okay, yeah. So I'd say for me, I definitely have a lot that I'm still working on, and it would be a laundry list to go through everything. But the hardest thing that the biggest thing I want to improve with myself is working more on my vulnerability. And while I feel that I am very accepting of when other people are vulnerable to me, I have a really hard time reciprocating that. So that's something that I feel would increase the trust in relationships with everybody in my life. But it's hard and it's scary, as everybody here has mentioned. And there's some parts of my life that I'm just not personally ready to relive quite yet. But that's the biggest thing that I'm hoping to improve. In terms of the building relationships with your supervisor, I think it's so important, and I feel really thankful for my staff. I don't know if anybody is on from my staff right now, but a situation that actually just happened yesterday, I made a mistake in how I handled a conversation, and it was taken the wrong way by the people I was talking to. Obviously, my intentions were not negative, but that's how it was interpreted. But I'm incredibly thankful that I have built the relationship with my staff, because they felt comfortable enough to come and talk to me about how they felt about that conversation. And for me, that was huge. Not only did it made me feel bad that it was handled inappropriately, but also made me feel good that I had that trust that now I can build upon that and move forward. So whether you're at a supervisor position, a keeper position, it doesn't matter where you are, working on building those relationships is huge. And I think that's the biggest thing I want to emphasize is finding your support team and learning how you yourself is going to be the best version of yourself, and using your support team to get there is just so incredibly important.
Anybody else in the panel? Go ahead and jump in.
I want to say that, like I said, after 20 years of working with really, really intense stories of trauma, this is why what you do is so important to someone like me, because I will tell you that one of the most healing experiences that I have is when I go to the Endangered Wolf Center and I step out of my car, and being in that environment and being with those animals is one of the most healing things that I can think of. And being with the people that care about the wolves, it's been a whole new wonderful group of friends for me. And so that's just kind of a different perspective on what I do with the things that I've been struggling with. And I'm so, so grateful to have that.
Any other panelists? Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I'll hit two random things that were asked about. I think as a supervisor, one of the things I think you can do is just accept that there's going to be that pre-pandemic productivity doesn't exist anymore. We were propping that up for years with, working overtime but not getting paid for it. And, I think that we just have to live with being able to accomplish less. And that gives you space to allow people to deal with what they need to deal with. The other thing I'd say, don't be afraid of trying to find the sweet spot for how you need to process things. I've been married exactly as the same amount of time I've been in the zoo and aquarium field, and we're still working through the fact that my wife wants to process things by talking about it, and talking about things for me is reliving it, and I don't want to do that. So we've gotten to a point where I can listen to her stories about work, and she can allow me not to talk about stuff that's happening at work, and that's what works for both of us.
Thank you, Jim. Kathayoon, Maya, Rick.
I can hop in. My phone's currently dying. I do have to go. But something that I would like to really drive off with all of this is know that, everything that everyone's feeling, even though everything is different per person, you're still not alone as a collective. Just because it's not commonly talked about in the workspace doesn't mean that you're the only one that's feeling that burnout, that you're the only one that's feeling that compassion. It's like Rick said, it's like, your job is what you are, not who you are. New York City AAZK had a Compassion Fatigue and Burnout panel earlier this month, and something that one of the panelists that we had that said that really spoke to me is that if mental health can be summarized to one word, that word will be normal. And that's something that we all have to remember, that it is becoming normalized. And the great thing about social media is that you're starting to see a little bit more of it. Remember that just because you're the only voice in the room doesn't mean that your voice is less important than somebody else's. That, being seen can take things so much further. And that, an advice for supervisors is that you have, or management staff, or even, someone that's on your team, you have no idea how that one compliment can completely change somebody's day. Just saying that one thing is just like, hey, I really liked how you did such and such. It could really turn it around for a lot of people. And, a piece of advice that I can offer when it comes to burnout and compassion fatigue in this field is it is very important to have friends that are not in this field. And it's something that a lot of people don't think about. It's just like, oh my God, there's another person that's a zookeeper. That's great. We have so much in common, but you're comparing at some point, it goes from that's a cool animal you're working with to at some point you're comparing trauma. And it's really nice to have someone that's not in the field that you can just find something else to completely talk about, like your favorite show, your favorite band, your favorite concert. You got to get out of that mindset of I'm a zookeeper and all I have to talk about is zoo. And, understand that you, at the end of the day, you are a great person. It takes a lot for us to be in this field, whether it's in the zoo field, vet field, we're like, it takes takes a lot of dedication as a parent, as a friend, and we miss out on a lot and we beat ourselves up a lot because we miss out on a lot. But that doesn't make you any less of a person, doesn't make you any less of a wife, doesn't make you any less of a husband, doesn't make you any less of a friend. And sometimes we got to take a moment to just decompress from the day and find our center. And it's very important to have an open dialogue with everybody in your life. And I do have to hop off, but a really big thank you for allowing me to talk here tonight. Whenever we talk about compassion fatigue and burnout, every single person that talked today, I had a hold in crying in Manhattan. I want you guys to all know that because you definitely touched something inside of me. This is a big topic, a very strong topic for me, and I'm very happy and very glad to be a part of this. And I look forward to down the line when zoos do take more of our mental health into consideration. So thank you also very much.
Thank you very, very much. I think the more we do these, the more it's getting picked up in other locations or in other facilities and in other organizations. This is the start where the ball's rolling for sure, and we need to keep it going. Rick or Kathayoon, do you have any last thoughts you want to share?
I'm just going to pop in real quick and kind of piggyback on what Maya said. And I saw some comments here, as far as referring to friends outside of the zoo world and how sometimes it's really hard. Our whole life revolves around a very, very unique lifestyle because of the career. If that is hard for you, or if you don't have that available to you, and Lord knows it's hard making friends as adults because it's not like school where you just sit next to someone random and become friends. What I want you to do is go back to what I said earlier, boundaries. And these are boundaries for yourself in your behavior, not boundaries for other people and how they're treating you. If you find yourself tripping down that path of sharing trauma, and yes, there is verbalizing things to help release it, but sometimes it becomes cyclical. And all of a sudden, all we do all of our whole lunch break is just talk about how everything's so horrible instead of actually doing it in a constructive way. So set boundaries. Hey, I know normally at lunch, guys, we talk about all the shit that's wrong with this place. How about for 10 minutes, we talk about some of the favorite movies we binge watch or TV shows, or pick a topic and hold it to that 10 minutes. That's all it's got to be, or maybe 5 minutes, and then just spout off about all the crap that's wrong. I don't care. But then the next couple of weeks, make it 15 minutes. And same thing if you're married to someone in the business, or you're close to your friends, and you're outside of the bar and things start tripping down that path of complaining about how everything's wrong. Hey, could I just do a quick topic change? Or let's, guys, we live this, we talk about it, we're here at this bar having fun. How about we talk about that and whatever it may be, pick something. And if your group of friends or your social circle is going to go that route, think of this action before you get there. Have something typed into your phone that I want to talk about these 3 topics tonight. I'm going to bring them up. This is living intentionally. These are intentional boundaries. These little subtle shifts can start making a difference. So just want to throw that out there to piggyback on what Maya was saying.
And Kathayoon.
Yeah, I don't know that I have anything like stunning to add. Yeah, I think one thing I'm working on is trying to balance the whole it's okay not to be okay thing with the idea that I'm just using my traumatic event as a crutch for not healing, right? Does that make sense? I have been working, the beginning of the week, I had a emotional breakdown about seeing people from my old institution at AZA next week. Totally hit me by surprise, didn't expect it. It was like 8 a.m. So Lord knows nobody expects to start their day that way. But it was a really interesting, like, okay, like I'm obviously still not okay. Like there's obviously still things I need to work through, but it's also not about getting through something. It's about integrating that thing into your life, right? So I'm not trying to get over what happened. I'm not trying to patch over this really traumatic event. I'm trying to integrate it into my existence in a way that still allows me to move forward and be the person that I am and be the person that I want to be, like ever inching towards, maybe let's just go for like yellow zone. I don't know that like green zone is going to happen anytime soon, but like yellow zone. And I don't have an answer for that, except that I think I don't want to be that person that falls into the space where I say like, I'm not okay, I'm not okay, I'm not okay. And that just becomes who I am as a person that's not okay. Right. Like I want to be a person that's okay, maybe not thriving, right? But at least like realistic and reasonable in my healing.
And I would say I'm in a similar spot. I definitely understand that. And just to go back to what you were saying to earlier, I am proud that and happy this is part of my identity. I think for me, it was too much. It was everything, and I let it. And I don't know about some of you guys. I think some people it surprises you where you let it become your identity. I actively chose it. I watch it happening. I watched myself do it. And so yeah, trying to figure out how to work through that to find something that's healthier. And yes, I would love to be in the yellow. I'm working towards that, and I'm going to be patient. And a lot of the things that were said here was incredibly helpful. So thank you all very much. Just when you put stuff together like this, and I'm all like secretly going, I'm doing this so that I can selfishly hear all your wisdom. So thank you. I'm very, very grateful for all of you. And I really hope that everybody feels like they got to say what they needed to say. And I hope everybody that listened got something. You know, I don't know if this was for you or not, but if it is, please let us know. There's a lot of us that you can find on Facebook and Instagram and email. We can try to put that in the comment section, our websites, to reach out to us. We can put it in the Facebook event comment section as well, and we'll try to round up some stuff and see if AAZK can send out an email or newsletter or something. We'll figure it out, but we'll try to be reachable. Thank you all very, very much. Panelists, you're amazing. I truly appreciate everything that you shared. Let's keep the ball rolling with this topic. This is extremely important. And the more we all work towards bringing this type of language, this conversation into our facilities, the better. It's really gonna make a big difference. I'm seeing it happening. So thank you all. All right, I'm going to keep this open for a little while just because I have found out that I can download the chat, and I believe that the recording also saves it, but I'm just going to double down on it a little bit. And then also for those people who just want to keep the conversation going a little bit, we'll just keep it open for a little bit longer. But sayonara, if you need to go, have a wonderful evening. Take care. If anybody wants to say anything, you can unmute. Chat.
I'm happy to stick around for a little bit longer, Steph, if anyone has any questions.
If there's any panelists that stick around, anybody that wants to pop on the microphone and ask any of the panelists any questions, just please be professional. You may do that. Rick,
Hey,
go
sorry.
ahead, Julian.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah,
great.
what's up?
All right. Thank you guys so much. Really, just wanted to pop in and say that this was great. Glad we all got to talk about this. It's so important because as a collective, you know, we got to take care of each other and we got to take care of ourselves. And those two things are really important to bind one another. And I guess my question for you is, we've talked a lot about how taking care of yourself can lead to taking care of others sort of a lot better, but have you sort of experienced that in any of your personal lives and any of your personal work journeys? Like, what sort of frame of reference are you coming at that from? Because that's something I'm very passionate about.
Well, I can just say for myself, my own personal experience, that I poured so much into my job that I ended up getting very sick and nobody could figure out what it was. It wasn't making sense. I was eating very well, but I was losing weight. I started developing a lump in my throat, and someone who's a professional speaker, it became very hard to talk. It felt like I was always had something in my throat. Long story short, it was a body's response to adrenal fatigue and overstress because I was constantly pouring into other things. And I took some time then to do self-care, to start really reflecting what I was doing and why. Dialed heavily down on my caffeine, started doing physical activity more than just walking around my facilities where I worked, and making sure I was being very mindful to stop down twice a day for 5 to 10 minutes to just be thoughtful and where I was. And just those simple steps, so they weren't simple at the time, I will admit. And I also started, under the recommendation of a professional, started journaling, writing down simple 5 things I was grateful for each day. That was it. And I could be as long or short-winded as I wanted. But doing those little shifts in my behavior in about 3 months, my body made a complete turnaround. And that alone was an indicator then that I was on the right track. And I also started then working, doing some meditation and reflection so I could start getting better sleep, because that was another thing, is I couldn't fall asleep for the life of me because my brain wouldn't shut off. And doing those things where I took time out of each day for myself, little bits here and there, allowed me to then show up for my family better, not be stressed and taxed when I come home and bring that home with me, but then also show up to my job better. And when I showed up to my job, because I've been practicing those things to take a breath, to ground, to relax for a moment, to focus on my breathing, when things started to get stressful at work, somebody would spout off or whatever would happen, those tools were automatic now, because I'd established routines and habits on how to go into this. Okay, don't jump into fight or flight, but actually stay in that moment of, not stay in the moment, but to get back in the moment of centering and relaxing and deflecting the stress that was coming up in my body, recognizing that what I was doing and how I could change that. And it allowed me to show up better for work, show up better for my family. And then so I just kept replicating it and building on it. And I'm at a place now, it's been 2 years since that happened. I can tell you, sir, that it's night and day lifestyle. And I still work at the high level performance that I've always worked at. I've actually taken on a second job with my coaching, and still very connected to my family as well. So it's just a matter of recognizing that we fall into the trap of believing we must do everything for this one thing. And we just can't do that. It doesn't, there's no longevity to it, versus taking care of ourselves gives longevity to doing passion projects, to doing the work that you're passionate about and what you want to do. I hope that makes sense.
That was great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and just to add on that, I mean, I haven't had quite the same experience, but similar experiences of I'm still very much a work in progress, and I'm still learning how to build those routines, but it is a huge realization that it doesn't come overnight, and it's something you constantly have to work on. And I still notice when I have really hard days or weeks at work, I tend to pour myself into that. And then by the time I get home, I'm just shut down and I can't give any of myself to my family. And that's not fair to them or to me. And so when I notice that happening to myself, it's almost like a kick in the butt to figure out how I can get back into recreating those routines that are so necessary for that harmony in your life.
My unhealthy coping strategy always is emotional eating. And so I can't emphasize enough the importance of appropriate nutrition and healthy nutrition, because when I'm eating in a way that really fuels my body, then I can handle stress and I'm happier. So for me, that's something that I do still struggle with, but when I'm able to do it and lock it in, it makes a huge difference in all the other aspects of my life.
Thank you so much.